So imagine you're reading a really hardcore financial strategy book, like the kind that is just packed with real estate valuation formulas, aggressive wealth building rules, stark market reality.
Oh, sure. Very dry, usually. Bullet points, charts, you know.
Right, exactly. But now imagine all of that cold, calculated information is written out as this tender, deeply personal letter to a 5-year-old child.
Wow, okay. That is quite the juxtaposition.
It really is. And
Yeah.
that is exactly the source material we are unpacking in today's deep dive.
I mean, we usually expect financial advice to be delivered in this very sterile, authoritative tone,
Yes.
right? But framing aggressive investment strategy as a fatherly confession, it completely changes how we absorb the information.
It really does. So we're diving into this fascinating document. It's structured as a letter from a father to his young son, whose name is Sun, or Taeyang in Korean.
Right.
And the father is basically summarizing the core lessons from a highly regarded South Korean investment book. He's hoping to pass down like a survival guide for his son's future.
Which is such an interesting way to frame a summary.
Yeah, and our mission today is to explore the absolute center of this letter. The big realization here is that the biggest roadblock to your financial success, it isn't the stock market. It's not the Federal Reserve.
Right. It's not the global economy either. The roadblock is, well, you.
Yeah, you are the problem.
Exactly. More specifically, the roadblock is your own primal evolutionary instincts. The central thesis we're exploring today is that our brains are wired to survive in the wilderness. You know, they are not wired to optimize for long-term compounding interest.
Right. To really understand why this father is so adamant about fighting human nature, we first need to look at the author whose book he is summarizing, because we aren't talking about some detached Wall Street billionaire here.
Not at all. The author of the original book is actually this massive success story in the FIRE movement. You know, financial independence, retire early.
Oh,
He
yeah.
hit his goal in his early 40s. But his path to get there was, honestly, it was brutally chaotic.
Yeah, I mean, right out of the gate, he made an absolute fortune. We are talking 4 billion won, which is roughly 3 million US dollars.
That's a huge sum.
It is. And then he lost every single penny of it. He went all the way back to zero.
Which, honestly, arguably makes his advice significantly more credible than someone who just, you know, got lucky on a single bull run.
Oh, totally. He had to rebuild it.
Right. He had to build that wealth back from scratch entirely through very methodical real estate and stock investments. And he eventually gained this massive following on a Never real estate cafe.
That's like a really popular online forum in South Korea, right?
Exactly. He got famous there because his market predictions were almost uncomfortably accurate. He didn't build this philosophy in a classroom. He built it by losing everything and having to figure out the actual mechanics of why it happened.
Yeah, the hard way. So his core philosophy is pretty straightforward, but it's entirely ruthless. He argues that you must invest in exclusive targets, like land. You must obsessively protect your principal. But the foundational rule, the real mantra the father keeps repeating to his son in this letter, is that you must invest with your head, not your heart.
Invest with your head, not your heart.
Yeah.
That's the crux of it.
Right. And the author applies this head-over-heart rule to real estate in a way that strips all the emotion out of buying a home. Let's actually walk through what he calls the 200 to 300 million won rule, because the math here is fascinating.
Oh, on this part.
Yeah. So if I'm understanding the source correctly, he points out that the raw cost to construct a single standard brand new apartment unit, like just the concrete, the labor, the materials, it's roughly 200 to 300 million won.
Right. The physical building cost.
Exactly. So if you were comparing a brand new apartment to a much older existing apartment in the exact same neighborhood, the price gap between them should logically be exactly that construction cost.
Because you are isolating the variables. The underlying land value in that specific neighborhood is identical for both buildings.
Yeah.
The land is the exclusive appreciating asset. The building itself is just a depreciating structure sitting on top of it.
Which makes total sense. So if the price gap between the shiny new apartment and the 20-year-old apartment is significantly larger than 200 million won, the math basically tells you that the old apartment is objectively the better value.
Precisely. But people get swept up in the emotion, right? They want the pristine, untouched kitchen and the modern amenities. So they overpay for the depreciating asset rather than just focusing on the land value.
It's like playing a video game where you think the objective is to beat the market, but the final boss is actually just yourself.
That is a perfect analogy. That is the perfect example of the heart hijacking the head. I mean, the math is simple addition and subtraction. It is entirely logical.
Right, but we just ignore it.
Yet, buyers routinely ignore that logic because they just fall in love with the stainless steel appliances. And I think that transitions us perfectly into the core of the source material. Why do we fail to execute simple logic?
Yeah, what is wrong with our brains?
Well, the author identifies 9 specific human instincts that are actively sabotaging your ability to build wealth.
Let's actually group these into categories so we can really see the mechanics of how our brains betray us. The first group we can call the primal traps. And the most obvious one here is the pleasure instinct. The father actually references the famous marshmallow experiment in his letter to explain this to his son.
Oh yeah, the psychological study from Stanford. It's a great analogy. Kids were offered 1 marshmallow immediately, or 2 if they could simply wait 15 minutes alone in an empty room.
Which is an eternity for a kid.
Exactly. And the ones who delayed gratification generally had better life outcomes across the board. In financial terms, the pleasure instinct is what drives us to seek immediate gratification through consumption, rather than delaying it through investment.
Right.
If you cannot tolerate the temporary discomfort of, say, living frugally to clear high-interest debt, you simply cannot build a foundation for wealth. You're basically eating the single marshmallow every single day.
Wow, yeah. Eating the single marshmallow every day. Which brings us to the second primal trap. Loss aversion. This is a massive one. People are so terrified of losing money in a bad investment that they keep everything in cash, thinking they're playing it safe.
But we have to look at the psychological mechanism behind that fear. Behavioral economists have proven that the psychological pain of losing $100 is roughly twice as intense as the joy of gaining $100.
Wait, twice as intense?
Yes. We are biologically wired to avoid loss at all costs. Because, out in the wilderness, losing a meal meant starving. It was life or death.
Right, that makes sense evolutionarily.
But the tragic irony in modern finance is that avoiding investment to protect your cash guarantees a loss. By doing nothing, you are allowing inflation to silently gut your purchasing power.
Yeah, because your balance looks the same.
Exactly. Your nominal balance stays the same, so your brain doesn't trigger a panic response. But your actual wealth is bleeding out daily.
It's a silent killer. So let's move to the second category, which we can call the comfort traps. The first is the herd instinct. Doing what the crowd does to avoid the social discomfort of being an independent thinker.
That one is pretty common.
Yeah. But the second comfort trap in the source material really threw me. The author calls it the territory instinct, and he argues strongly against our natural urge to settle down in one home.
He really goes against the grain there.
He does. And I have to push back on this. I mean, finding a forever home and nesting is practically the universal financial dream. You lock in a mortgage, you build equity, you establish roots in a community. How could moving around frequently possibly be better for building wealth?
I know, it feels incredibly counterintuitive.
Yeah.
We equate stability with financial security. But the author argues that the territory instinct makes you blind to the broader market.
Okay, how so?
Think about it. If you live in the same house for 20 years, your understanding of real estate is limited to a single micro-market. Frequent residential mobility forces you to actively engage with the economy.
So you're constantly learning.
Every time you move, you have to analyze a new neighborhood. You evaluate school districts, transportation infrastructure, future zoning plans. You train your brain to spot value and recognize patterns of appreciation.
Okay, I understand the concept of gaining market savvy, but let's talk about the friction costs. Because moving is incredibly expensive.
It is.
You are bleeding capital every time you sell and buy. Closing costs, broker fees, taxes, physical moving expenses. Does simply knowing the market better really offset losing tens of thousands of dollars in transaction fees every few years?
That is the exact mathematical hurdle most people can't get past. But the author's premise is that the friction costs are linear, while the gains from spotting an undervalued high-growth neighborhood are exponential.
I see.
Right. If staying put earned you a standard 3% annual appreciation on your home, but your acquired market savvy allows you to identify a neighborhood about to experience a 15% surge due to, say, a new transit line, the capital gain completely eclipses the transaction costs.
Okay, that math makes sense.
Staying in one place is safe, but it fundamentally limits your wealth ceiling to whatever's happening on your specific street.
So you are basically treating primary housing as an active rotating portfolio rather than a static vault. That requires a massive shift in perspective.
It's a completely different way to live.
It is. Okay, let's look at the final category of psychological hurdles, the ego and blame traps. The show-off instinct is probably the most visible one in society today. It's the urge to buy the expensive imported car or the luxury watch just to signal status.
And the mechanism of destruction there is twofold. First, you are draining your capital. But second, you are trading liquid cash for rapidly depreciating assets.
Right.
I mean, a luxury car loses roughly 20% of its value the second you drive it off the lot. You are literally paying a premium to look wealthy while mathematically making yourself poorer.
Which is wild.
True wealth is often invisible. It's the stock portfolio or the unglamorous rental property that actually generates cash flow.
Then there are the twin traps of the guru fantasy and the witch fantasy. Oh, these are fascinating.
Yeah. The guru fantasy is our desperate desire for certainty in an uncertain world. So we blindly follow self-proclaimed experts, hoping someone out there has a crystal ball. But the witch fantasy is the darker side of that coin.
Finding someone to blame.
Exactly. When things go wrong, we look for a witch to blame. The media, market manipulators, or a rigged system.
Right. Blaming a witch is essentially a defense mechanism for the ego. If your investment fails because the system is rigged, well, then it isn't your fault. You protect your self-esteem.
It's comforting.
It is. But by shifting the blame to an external shadow figure, you rob yourself of the ability to analyze your own poor decision-making. You learn nothing, which guarantees you will make the exact same mistake again.
It's all about avoiding personal responsibility, and that feeds directly into what the author calls the perception error, the arrogance of thinking you can predict complex market variables.
You just can't. No. The goal isn't to predict the future. The goal is to position yourself to be adaptable. So if our biology and our egos are constantly conspiring to keep us poor, how do we actually fight back? Because just being aware of these instincts clearly isn't enough. We need a system.
And the author provides one. He outlines 8 specific implementation tools designed to override these primal urges. And the most effective one is taking willpower out of the equation entirely through something he calls neural conditioning.
Neural conditioning, which sounds incredibly futuristic, but it's fundamentally just about habit automation, right?
Pretty much.
If you rely on your willpower to save money at the end of the month, the pleasure instinct will win 9 times out of 10. Neural conditioning means setting up automatic transfers the day your paycheck hits.
Make it invisible.
Yes, it means keeping a strict household ledger so spending becomes a conscious accounting act rather than a mindless swipe. You build a system where doing the right thing happens by default.
Exactly. And another fascinating tool he includes on this list is praying to God.
Okay, I have to admit, seeing prayer listed as a hardcore wealth-building tool in a financial strategy book stopped me in my tracks.
It seems totally out of place, right?
Yeah.
Until you look at the psychological utility of it. He isn't suggesting you pray for your tech stocks to rally.
Oh, thank goodness.
Right. He is advocating for prayer or deep meditation as a mechanism for profound emotional regulation. When the market crashes, your amygdala, the fear center of your brain, takes over.
And you panic.
You enter a fight or flight state, which leads directly to panic selling. Having a daily practice of centering yourself creates a mental buffer. It allows you to pause, regulate your nervous system, and re-engage your logical brain before you make a catastrophic financial decision.
Finding calm in the chaos is an active financial strategy. I love that.
It's so necessary.
The book also details 10 failure patterns to avoid. Let's actually dig into the one that I think traps the most middle-class earners, the unconscious money leak type.
Oh, this one hurts.
It does. This isn't about people buying sports cars they can't afford. This is about people who make a solid salary but bleed out financially from 1,000 tiny, unexamined cuts.
It is the ultimate manifestation of avoiding the ledger. It's the daily premium coffee, the 4 different streaming subscriptions you barely use, the food delivery fees because you didn't plan dinner.
Right.
Because none of these purchases are large enough to trigger the brain's financial alarm system, they bypass our logic entirely. But compounded over a decade, those unconscious leaks represent the down payment on a property.
That is sobering. And the counter to that is the poverty blame shifter type, which circles back to the witch fantasy we discussed earlier. If you are constantly complaining that inflation is destroying the middle class, but you refuse to audit your own recurring expenses, you are choosing comfort over accountability.
Yeah, you're playing the victim instead of the player.
So how do we pivot from playing defense to playing offense? The author lays out 9 core strategies for homeownership, and they are incredibly blunt.
Very blunt.
First rule, where, not when. Location is the ultimate decider. People twist themselves into knots trying to time the market perfectly, waiting for interest rates to drop 0.25%.
Which is impossible.
The author argues that timing the market is a fool's errand. Just buy in a premium location when you can afford it.
And to find those locations, he has another rule. Good houses are found with feet, not heads. You cannot build a real estate portfolio by scrolling through online listings from your couch.
Because the internet only shows you the polished marketing material.
Precisely. You have to physically walk the neighborhoods. You need to see the condition of the sidewalks, notice which businesses are opening or closing, and observe the actual foot traffic.
Yeah.
The ground truth of a neighborhood rarely matches the digital listing.
He also advises to downsize for a wealthy neighborhood. Meaning, if you have a set budget, you should prioritize a premium, high-growth location over a larger square footage.
Location, location, location.
Right. It's better to own a small, cramped apartment in a thriving economic hub than a sprawling mansion in a declining town. But there is one strategy here that I genuinely struggle with.
Let me guess. The broker fees.
Yes. The rule is pay good broker fees. Everything we are taught about personal finance tells us to negotiate, lower the management fees, cut out the middleman, save your capital. Why on earth is a ruthless financial book telling us to essentially overpay a real estate agent?
I get the hesitation. This requires understanding the mechanics of how information flows in an asymmetric market. Real estate is not like buying a stock where everyone has access to the exact same price at the exact same time.
Right. It's opaque.
Real estate is fundamentally driven by insider information. The most premium properties, the desperate sellers offering a massive discount, those deals rarely make it to public websites. Brokers control the flow of that premium information.
But even so, handing over a massive percentage on $1 million property just feels like a violation of the rule to protect your capital.
It feels like a loss? Sure. But you have to view the broker fee as an investment in a private intelligence network. Imagine a broker gets a call about an incredibly undervalued property from a seller who needs to liquidate immediately.
Okay.
Who is the broker going to call first? Are they going to call the client who spent 3 weeks nickel and diming them over a 0.5% commission? Or are they going to call the client who happily pays their full fee or even offers a bonus for early access?
Well, they are going to call the person who makes them the most money with the least friction.
Exactly. By cheaping out on the broker fee, you are permanently locking yourself out of the shadow market where the actual wealth-building deals happen. You are trying to save pennies on the transaction, but you are losing out on hundreds of thousands of dollars in hidden equity.
Wow. Okay. When you frame it as paying for an intelligence network, the logic is undeniable.
It changes the whole perspective.
So we have this entire framework. We understand the cold math of the 200 million and one rule. We know the biological traps like loss aversion. We have the rules for buying property.
We have the blueprint.
But here is where this deep dive gets incredibly poignant. We have to bring all of this out of the theoretical realm of spreadsheets and back into the living room of the father writing this letter.
Because knowing these rules and actually living them are two entirely different things.
Exactly. Towards the very end of his notes, the father shares a deeply vulnerable anecdote with his 5-year-old son about their previous weekend.
It illustrates the entire thesis of the book perfectly. Not through a stock market crash, but through a standard parenting struggle.
Yeah, so the father planned this highly educational, enriching weekend trip. He took young Taeyang to an insect museum in Yongin. He wanted his son to learn and expand his mind. But Taeyang is 5 years old.
Right.
He had absolutely zero interest in the educational exhibits. He just wanted to go outside and feed the pigs and the peacocks.
The father's expectations clashed entirely with the child's reality. It happens to every parent.
Oh, 100%. And it spirals from there. There is a massive tantrum because Taeyang wants to play in the fan and the parents say no. The tension builds all weekend, spilling over into Sunday evening. The family is exhausted, they're trying to eat dinner, and the kid is throwing an absolute fit, demanding to watch YouTube at the table. And after a long week of work and a chaotic weekend, the father just breaks.
He experiences a complete failure of his own head over heart philosophy.
He snaps. Instead of using his head, which would require tapping into patience, understanding child psychology, and realizing his son is just overstimulated and tired, he gives in completely to his primal instinct.
Yep.
He lets his emotional frustration take the wheel. He gets angry, he yells, and he gives his son a physical knock on the head to force compliance.
The guilt he expresses in the letter afterward is just visceral.
Yeah, you can really feel it.
He writes a confession to his son, admitting that he used his own fatigue as an excuse for his lack of discipline. He desperately wanted to be a logical, loving father, but in the heat of the moment, he let his raw emotions hijack his behavior.
It is such a profoundly human moment, and when you think about it, snapping at your kid after an exhausting, emotionally draining weekend relies on the exact same psychological mechanism as hitting the panic sell button on your stock portfolio after a stressful week in the market.
Wow, yes.
In both scenarios, your rational brain knows the correct path. You know the rules. But the immediate stress overwhelms your nervous system.
And your primitive instincts hijack your logic just to find an immediate release from the pressure. It highlights exactly why the author included praying to God as a financial tool.
Exactly.
The father failed to regulate his own emotional state, and the result was damage to a relationship he values above all else. He uses this personal failure to teach his son the ultimate lesson of the book. Whether you are trying to be a ruthless, successful investor navigating a volatile market, or just trying to be a patient, loving parent navigating a Sunday dinner, fighting your natural human instincts is an agonizing endeavor. It is difficult every single day.
The temptation to take the easy emotional way out is always there. The father ends the letter by promising his son that he will practice what he preaches. He vows to try harder to control his own emotional reflexes, to be a better dad tomorrow than he was today. And he signs off with a simple, "I love you, son."
That sign-off completely reframes the entire document. The concept of head over heart is stripped of its capitalist ruthlessness.
Yeah.
It isn't just a life hack to accumulate a massive net worth. It is a fundamental requirement for personal maturity. Choosing logic over emotion is an act of care for your future self and for the people who depend on you.
So what does this actually mean for you, listening to this deep dive right now? The core takeaway is that true wealth, whether we are talking about absolute financial freedom or a deeply healthy relationship with your family, is forged through the daily, often uncomfortable practice of choosing logic over your raw, primal urges.
You have to do the work.
You have to develop the self-awareness to recognize when your fear, your ego, or simply your exhaustion is driving the car, and you have to deliberately take the wheel back.
Absolutely.
I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over as you go about your day. If operating against your natural instincts is the proven mathematical path to getting richer, making sharper decisions, and even being a more patient parent, well, what other area of your life is secretly being sabotaged by your primal urges right now?
That is the big question.
Where else are you letting the heart overrule the head simply because it feels easier in the moment? Because as this father's letter so beautifully proves, sometimes the most tender, loving thing you can do for your future is to face the cold, hard math of your own behavior.